Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Roadmap. I'm your host, Rach, and today we are in a different location, different topic of conversation, and today's episode is all about values. So, like many companies, our core values sit at the heart of what we do and how we work with each other every day. And it's something that matters to us a lot as a company. So today I am joined by Kate, Dave and Abeer, who will be sharing some of their insights around the work they've been collaborating on together, and how Auto Trader's values have enabled them to get the best out of what they do. So welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hey. So before we get started, can you give us a quick intro to who you are and what you do at Auto Trader? I don't know who wants to kind of start us off.
I can.
You go.
Yeah, I can go first. So I am a delivery lead. I've been part of the Auto Trader for about 2.5 years now, and it's around sort of project management, software project management, so around those lines.
Want to go next?
No, you go.
No worries. I'm David Lowe. I'm an insight manager. I've been with Auto Trader for just over 16 years, so been in quite a few different roles, but currently working in data and insight.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm a marketing manager in the customer marketing team. So we're responsible for all the communications to our retailers to make sure that they're getting the best out of Auto Trader, making sure it's a partnership. I've been with the company for about 5 or 6 years now, so flown over.
Excellent. Lots of experience here. So why are we chatting about values today?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, values. I personally kind of feel like, it's something that a lot of companies have. Like any company, you go onto their website, there's something that they sort of value in terms of ethics and anything else, like a particular disposition that they put onto the website. But it almost feels like a checklist, checkbox activity for a lot of companies. But what I find at Auto Trader, it is actually quite different, and it almost affects, at a subconscious level, affects the way you do your job and the decisions that you're making. It is a guidance. It's always kind of there, and yeah, it just helps you figure things out.
I think a lot of them we just embody without even realising a lot of the time, as cheesy as it sounds. I think it's definitely true what Abeer said. It's not just a tick box list on a sort of website or piece of paper to say these are our values. I think everybody is hired based on the values as much as their ability to do the job, and it really shows. I honestly am not lying when I say I've not met a terrible person at Auto Trader. Everybody's really genuine and sincere and wants to help each other. And I think that's because we actually sort of embody those values on a daily basis without even realizing. So quite often you'll be sort of adaptable and doing these things, but not being like, oh, I'm doing this today and encompassing this value. It's just very natural. And I think that really helps with a lot of the projects that we all work on.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. I think the values sort of feed that culture and that way of working. I think certainly over the past sort of 10 and 15 years, the values have changed slightly. And I've seen that way of working sort of change across the business. So, yeah, I think it's got a big bearing on how we go about things, how we sort of approach projects, different tasks. So, really important.
Yeah, and it's good to have us three together because we come from different disciplines in the business, and we've worked on quite a lot of projects, and we've all got our sort of different areas and responsibilities. So I think it's a good example of having us three here because we sort of collaborate a lot on projects.
Yeah. How did you all come together then? What was the project that you worked on? Where you've been able to practice some of these values?
Yeah, there have been a few, haven't there? I think with myself and Kate, anyway, we sort of worked, and even Ian, who's in the production team here, we worked on the trade marketing side when it was sort of like starting up, which was
that was one of our first,
really interesting. It was quite a big and complex project, but I think whilst you're going through like different projects, I think you get to know the people that you're working with a lot closely as well. And I think that almost helps you when you're going into like a different project at a different time, because you've already built up that relationship and that bond to be able to express yourself openly with that person. I think it certainly helps.
Yeah, and we collaborated most recently on a really important product piece, which was our reviews changes. So in a nutshell, we, as a business, realised that actually the last 12 months of reviews for retailers were really important. And that was why we made a change. So in the past, it was their retailer's historic rating that would show us their overall average rating. But actually, research showed that more recent ratings were more valuable and important. And whilst older reviews were still valuable, they shouldn't contribute to the overarching review score of a retailer, because obviously customers and buyers want to see the most recent experience. Now, we knew this would be a challenging one because, you know, retailers are proud of their reviews. I'm proud of my reviews on Depop, so you know, you can kind of relate. So that was a project that we collaborated on quite recently that brought us together, I would say.
And that's how I met Kate and Abeer. It was essentially they needed data as part of the project for the review changes, and that's where I got involved. So yeah, it's been interesting working with Kate and Abeer on multiple projects since then. I think certainly from a data and insight perspective, collaboration's absolutely key. You know, analysts, insight managers, insight specialists, we don't know the answers to all the questions. So we need to liaise and collaborate with subject matter experts, project managers, marketing. So yeah, that's kind of my involvement with Kate and Abeer and how we met.
Yeah. So there's quite a few values at Auto Trader. I'm not going to kind of revise and test myself right now, but there are some really key ones that actually we, like you said, we practice every day and without realising it. It's just who we are as people. So there's things like community, you know, actually feeling like we're owners in a business as well, which I think is a really important thing. And I think it's something that I know it's come into effect quite recently, but actually is quite empowering to have that, where it feels like, you know, everybody's got a part to play and to have an opinion. There's a whole thing around openness and humility. So yeah, what I think would be interesting to do is kind of go through some values that actually meant a lot to you on these projects. So Dave, you actually mentioned to me recently something that meant a lot to you, and it's around humility. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of why that means a lot to you, how it's helped you when you've worked cross collaboratively?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's personally that's my favourite of the values. I think, like Kate said before, it feeds into the type of person we recruit into the business. Absolutely seen that. Like Kate said, I don't think there's a bad person that we work amongst. You know, everybody's very humble, but to your point there, Rachel, like, I think people take responsibility as well for their actions. So that humility feeds into sort of even project management perspective, I'd imagine, in terms of, are we doing the right thing, whether that's by the retailer or the consumer. So yeah, having that humility, that element of sort of, are we always doing the right thing, really? That question that's in the back of your mind when you're approaching projects, I think is a key one. I think there was something the fundamental that happened with the business quite a few years ago now when we removed sales commissions. And again, that was all done for the right reasons, with an air of humility, to make sure that we were selling the right products to the right people at the right time, essentially. So again, actions, values like humility, and that drive to always do the right thing, that's personally, you know, kept me with the business for an awfully long time. I think it's a really important value that's at the heart of what we do, really.
I think as well, just to that point, the right thing isn't always the easiest thing. And it's kind of navigating that, and there's always some last minute curveballs, and there's always times when we will launch projects and reflect and think, have we done it right? Do we need to iterate? And it's not about a blame game, it's about coming together and collectively sort of doing what's right. And quite often, like I mentioned, that the right thing isn't the easiest thing, and people will disagree, and that's fine. There's been times where we've had really contentious conversations because, you know, I'm at the heart of marketing, partnerships what we want, but then from another person's perspective, that could be something else. And we can, I don't even want to say come to blows because that sounds too heavy, but
healthy tensions.
Yeah, and people will disagree, but you know, that's good. Everybody's heard. It's the inclusivity comes into it as well. And again, going back to being humble, sometimes we will reflect and think that wasn't potentially the right thing to do. How do we move forward? And it's not about sort of whose responsibility was it. It's about just cracking on and keeping that sort of momentum and positivity, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I feel like there's so many overlaps between all of the values in of itself. I mean, I know we start off with humility, but so Kate touched on adaptability, and when we do get new information coming in through different stakeholders and how we adapt to that information. But actually, it's if you have that trust within the team and you are willing to show that vulnerability to your team members to actually say, actually, guys, I'm not entirely sure about this element. Is this something that you can help me with? And then so positions and, or you're a marketeer, you're a product manager, these sort of like kind of fade away because you're almost working together to solve the problem at hand. And that almost results in like better products, better services. So yeah, humility plays a huge role within team as well.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head there as well, where it's like we all have a role to play. And I've definitely worked at previous companies where you, because of the role that you have, you feel like there might be a hierarchy in place or that you have specific responsibilities. And that is true, but I think it's how you work with others that really makes the impact on the things that you do. So, for instance, I'm working product, and often a lot of product managers in the industry tend to think of themselves as mini CEOs, which is the worst phrase ever, and I hate it, and I don't think that's what product is about. I think actually coming into Water Trader, where we've got that collaborative environment, and everyone's got a power and a skill that they bring to the table, and it makes things so much easier when you've got these gnarly projects as well, where you think, oh heck, how am I going to like solve all this? It just really matters having that community around you and that openness as well. I think you really have to be vulnerable and, like you say, do the right thing, which often can be complicated. But I think that we help each other through that.
And I think that's a really key word. The vulnerability aspect of it is really, really key. Certainly from an anxiety perspective. I've suffered, don't mind admitting personally, with anxiety for quite a few years. I think being able to be vulnerable and admit, when things don't look right, and ask for help, I think that increases trust across the business. And that's really, really key when you're working on some of the more complicated projects, is being able to trust your colleagues and trust their opinions.
I think that agile element comes into it as well, because there's curveballs that can be thrown in a work sense, but we've also got to keep an eye on the industry, where like an ever change in the automotive industry, EVs are always in the headlines at the moment, and it's right, how do we swarm and jump on this thing? So one thing can be super important one moment and we can be aiming towards something, but then some industry news comes in, and because we want to be, the industry thought leaders and sort of be seen, it's like, right, we're gonna have to move attention to this now, or deviate this project to this, or that thing that we were working on and what we thought was right. It's actually so it's about being agile, but just swarming together and trusting each other. I think definitely.
And I think what Abeer said earlier resonated as well, that sort of crossover between the values. I think because we have to be adaptable, we have to be agile in the way that we work and respond to macroeconomic factors going on, that change by the day. I think having that trust, everybody having that humility, that way of working, just means we can jump onto different topics and continue that way of working, I guess.
I don't want to jump ahead to like a different value, but I think the one Auto Trader element and the whole ownership element comes into play here as well, because when you are operating as like a one Auto Trader, almost like, we're all aiming for the same thing, we're working as part of a team, you look at products and you look at services that you're about to launch in very different perspectives. You're looking at it, and if you take into account the customer sets that we operate with independents, retailers, franchises, so many different channels like car, van and bike. So before you know it, the permutations that you have to take into account is like very, very gnarly. And the last thing that you want is that a team member feels a little bit reluctant to share any concerns or any problems, because if they don't share that concern, you won't be able to account for it. And once you do account for it, and once you believe that, this particular product that we're going to launch has been completely stress tested, we know that's going to work with all these different permutations, you go out to market with so much more confidence, and that confidence radiates to RDS and then consequently radiates to our retailers as well. So it certainly helps.
It's a really key point, because there's loads of different types of retailers out there, isn't there? All the way from exactly right. So the products
and
themselves,
consumers.
Exactly
Absolutely.
right. So the products and services we make have got to be adaptable in that respect as well, I guess, to Abeer's point.
I want to touch on the adaptability point, as well. So we did just briefly mention that. So Kate, that is something that really matters to you in the work that you do. Working in an agile environment, things can, like you said, change a lot. When I first kind of started here, I always got told that as a person who works in product, always make sure you've got outcomes and things that you want to work towards and things that you want to align to, but never get tied up in your roadmap, because the things that you plan for 12 months in the future, they could change, and it's okay to do that. And I think actually the beauty of it is it does kind of help us as a business. We're not kind of stuck into, well, we've got to deliver this feature definitely in this particular point in the year. How do you navigate that? So you work in marketing, for instance, and I think there's probably quite a lot happening around you. How do you navigate that? How do you work with perhaps situations where, you know, like you do struggle with change? So if goalposts move, or actually this thing that you've really been putting your kind of thinking into and a lot of effort into, how do you adapt? How do you move around that?
I think for me, the first thing to do is kind of going back to that collaboration point. We're all in it together. It's not just me in marketing. There's a huge team of us all working on various things at once. And we often lean on each other for support to help each other out. But like you just mentioned there, you don't want to get too stuck in your sort of your one piece that you're working on. Equally though, because we take such pride in what we do, for example, the Auto Trader Awards that we run, and that's something that we've all worked on together, you do really care. You care about the outcome, and being agile is just part and parcel of that, because yes, it can be challenging, and it can be difficult at times, especially when things come up, whether that be, like we mentioned, something in the industry or something more important, or actually just a fundamental change has happened that means what we were working towards we're no longer sort of doing. I think it's all about ultimately wanting the best outcome and working together as a team to get that. And I think because we're also invested in it and we do want the best, like partnership is at the heart of what we do as marketing. It's so important to us. We don't, like I just said before, we don't just go out with this one size fits all, because that's not what we believe in. We believe in sort of each customer has their individual needs, and it's about making sure that we provide them with the right information. And we're not a product business in a sense of, we don't go out with just, here's a product, take it. It's about, does this solution fit this retailer's challenge? And often, being agile is part of that. But we're all in it together. We all know that we care and we want the best. And at times it can be overwhelming, but I think I've been in this business for quite a while now, and you always know that you do get there in the end. And it's a learning curve from a development perspective. It's so valuable. The amount that I've learned in my time of being here, it's phenomenal, because no one project's the same. And there's always something you can learn, whether that be something went wrong and how can we do better next time. I think being, again, humble and agile, going back to that, it's fine, because actually you just want the best for the next time. And then equally, you come out of projects like the reviews change one and you think, we did a really good job. So it's kind of, you've grown and developed, but also there's always some sort of learning in that. And I think agile is key there, because it's not smooth sailing. And we're not your typical sort of project management business. I think Abeer will probably mention that we don't often work to these really strict sort of deliverables, do we? We're always moving the goalposts, but it's fun and games.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, it's we have to be adaptable. We have to sort of take into account the information that can come in from any direction at all. It can be a hammer in the works. It could mean that you have to sort of shift what you're doing. It could vary. But I think another element of what we sort of aim for as a team is to allow RDS and other stakeholders to be adaptable as well. I know with the star rating changes, we were quite conscious about the fact that we didn't necessarily just want RDS to talk about that. We wanted to be able to weave in that information to already existing conversations that were happening through RDS, because we also appreciate that RDS know the customers possibly more than anybody else, and we want to provide them more customized service to that particular retailer and the goals and the ambitions that particular retailer has. So I think just providing the data and the information that RDS need in order to have those conversations allows them to be quite adaptable as well in the way they want to, form the narrative, in the way they want to talk about anything that we're doing within the business.
Yeah. RDS, for anyone listening at home, we have a lot of acronyms and initials here at AutoTrader. So RDS are the Retailer Development Support Team. So these are the really core teams to the business. Like, they are the voice of retailers and sellers. And yeah, I don't know where we'd be without them, to be fair, because I had no idea what to build as a product manager without them. So yeah, they're on the ground, they're speaking to sellers every day, they use a lot of the data that we provide, and they are our kind of ear and voice to the forecourts. Yeah,
really important part of the business. My career in AutoTrader's been within RDS for the last 16 years. So normally the sort of customer facing element of the business. But I think that adaptability sort of element, that value, if you will, is really important from a data and insight perspective. Certainly from an RDS perspective as well, is because, we may be able to give a chart or a visual that says, the reviews look like this. But actually different dealers want to see, or different retailers rather, want to see information in different ways. They want to interact with that information or have conversations in different ways around that information. So to me, as an insight manager, that's really sort of helpful for me in terms of how I approach that chart or that visual. It can't just be locked down, just almost like a non-interactive chart. That feeds into the way that I sort of work and deliver day to day. So yeah, really important just to enable those efficient conversations, to Abeer's point.
Yeah, and bring that story to life. Otherwise, it's just a data point.
Literally. So what?
Exactly
the chart looks like this. So what? Yeah.
Awesome. I also want to touch on the adaptability, the personality point. I'm sure a lot of other companies do this, but I find it really interesting here that when you start at AutoTrader or at some point in your career in AutoTrader, you do actually take a personality test, which sounds super serious, but actually it's really interesting, and it's called DISC. I have no idea what it stands for, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's basically a personality test that you take, and it asks you a bunch of questions about if you agree or strongly agree. And what it will do is it'll kind of categorize yourself into, right, here's me testing myself. Dominance, influence, social, society.
Stability, I think.
Stability?
Yeah, stability.
And community. We need to fact check that.
I think C is conscientious, isn't it?
Conscientious. So the idea is that you'll kind of have two personality types that come out of it. So you'll have like your primary one and a secondary one. And usually people are either in the top bit, which is like your dominance and influence, or it's more community minded, I guess, at the bottom where, there's more like the people element, and I guess more introvert people would sit on that side as well. And I think it's so interesting because you do these tests and you get this report and it gets printed out. And we do it on, I took mine at Green Man, which for anyone listening, it's like an induction, which is so when you go off site. When I joined, I thought it was an actual joke. I didn't realise you were going away for a couple of days to the Peak District, and it's this beautiful kind of like farmland that we go to. We do like loads of activities and you get to kind of meet new people, and I think it's such a good introduction to AutoTrader. Like, I had so much fun. I was like, oh god, this is going to be a really long few days. It's going to be really exhausting, but it was really, I really enjoyed it. And you do the personality test and you get this printed out, like it's like a school report, and you're like, oh crikey, like all these pages.
It's a grades on it.
Yeah. But it's great because as a kind of team of new people that have just joined the business, you get to kind of go through that together, and everyone's got these personality types that don't really change. However, we will chat about that because I think a couple of you have taken it since and you found that it's changed a little bit. But yeah, I think it's so interesting, and there's like a little bit about how did you work with people who you see like more of the, if you're opposite ends of this circle, how would you interact with them? And I just find it so interesting. I still use it to this day, where if I'm in a meeting or I'm collaborating with somebody and they might have a different personality type to me or how they handle situations, and that is completely fine. But it's so interesting because you use this thing and it's like, okay, how do I adapt so I can give them what they need and vice versa? And I think that adaptability there really matters. Like, how do you open yourself up? I wonder if, like, do you all have, because you all worked on a project together, do you have different disc profiles? Are you willing to share that?
You do? Yeah.
So I find it strange because I don't find many people who are the same one as me. I'm just one of those elements on the disc chart. I'm an I, an
strong
influencer. Yeah. I'm sure Abeer will talk to this more, but he actually is also an I. So yeah, I is kind of all about bringing the people into the room. And I think for me, I'm not just saying this, I think about this a lot in work and in my personal life. And it took me as an individual a long time to realise that not everybody thinks the same way that I do. And sometimes even now I have to remind myself. And I think it's about understanding your strengths, because there's so many strengths that come with each personality. No one is better than the other. But it's also understanding your weaknesses and learning that that's okay, and how to work with different personality types. And I think, like you mentioned, you can often spot them. I think I did guess yours, didn't I? Like,
did you?
Yeah, like working with people, you can just tell the more aware you are. And it's about understanding that the way you've delivered that piece of information may be perceived differently to how you think it's going to be perceived in your head. So being an influencer, I'm all about the people, the collaboration. But if I'm working with a C, for example, they're all about the detail and the intricacy.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm not about that. It's just sometimes that's not at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah.
Or if I'm working with a D, they can be quite dominant. And I think as an I, sometimes I can be like, oh, they were a bit bold. Do they not like me? And it's like, no, it's not that. It's just that not everybody's the same. And I think it's so crucial when you work on projects, and you need everybody.
No,
Definitely.
absolutely. I was just gonna, just second that point. I think I am absolutely convinced that if I was working as part of a team with just duplicates of myself, I would get nothing done.
Yeah, same.
Like, I would be super enthusiastic about the whole thing, and just like there'd be a lot of energy behind it. But when it comes to actually doing the do, it's like, so who's picking that up? You know what I mean? So you certainly need that diversity of people. You know, I know that, you know, the D, they certainly definitely want to get it done, and they, you know, you have a more sort of domineering way to get things done. The C, they want to get it right. So there's like positives to all of these different personality archetypes. So so completely second Kate's point there.
I think it's really key, that diversity of not just opinion but personality is really, really important from an insight perspective.
Yeah.
Because to Abeer's point there, data can be sort of consumed, interpreted in very different ways. So as an insight manager, it's kind of my job to kind of cut through that or provide something that appeals to all those different personalities.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just really, really helps sort of from a project perspective before you deliver something to get input from those different personality types, really.
I think you can learn from personality types as well, because I am a very strong C. I'm very detail orientated. I perhaps overthink quite a lot, and often that does result in perhaps internally me feeling like I'm not as confident. And I'm quite open about it here that sometimes I'm in that situation in a lot of things that I work on, and I've started to work more with D types. So the people that just make decisions really quickly, they've got that confidence there. They can really be there at the heart of conversations, and like influencers, like bring people together. And I've started to work more with these people, and actually from working with these types of people in business, I do feel a lot more confident as a person, and it feels like a little bit of an extra superpower that you get, where it's like, I don't have to do that all the time, but it helps.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting you say that, because I would say exactly the same thing, but I've learned so much from Dave and any other C that I work with, because like you mentioned there, I am quite high level, and you know, I can see the sort of bigger picture without going too much into detail. But it's so interesting, unless you go into the detail, you wouldn't understand all the different permutations. So working with Dave and working with more C's, I've actually sort of slowed myself down and, you know, garnered the ability to actually, understand the data and what's actually telling me. Yeah. Which certainly helps.
I can relate to that. And this is what we sort of alluded to before in terms of a bit of a change in personality over time, really. It's because I used to be a lot like sort of Abeer in terms of that sort of influencer sort of person in the meetings, etc. I think as my sort of career gravitated towards data, insight, got much more appreciation for accuracy, as
Yeah.
I'm sure you can imagine. So I think my personality as well has sort of changed alongside that a little bit. As Abeer's alluded to, I sort of have a different position in meetings now, really.
Yeah.
I sort of feed into different personality types differently than I used to. For example, prefer working with these, for example, than
Yeah.
I used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, as much as I don't think your fundamentals change, I think there's certain elements of that personality that will change over time. Yeah.
And perhaps things that you're missing as well, because there's definitely things that I feel like I should work on in my everyday job, or if I've had a meeting or a workshop where I think, oh, I wish I could have just done more of that. It's just how you adapt and how you learn from other people. And, you're always, I don't think anyone's like 100% reached like, oh, this is perfect. My career is perfect right now. I'm doing 100% the best job ever. You're just always chipping away and adapting. And I think Auto Trader gives you like a good foundation to do that. I'm definitely a different person versus 2 years ago when I started, and I was a little bit more sheepish and so
to be expected. I think it's only through transparency and knowing those personality types, to your point around Green Man, and going
everyone just
through
helps
them.
bring it out
Yeah.
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
I think if you know that and you know the way that you work optimally,
Yeah.
you can use that to your advantage. Yeah.
I don't think mine will ever change. I think I'm always going to be an I. but I know what you mean. I think, it's all about understanding yourself as much as it is understanding others, I think.
Yeah. I think there's a free test of this online, so if anyone is listening, we will find a link to this and put it in the show notes, because it is really interesting.
So fascinating.
Yeah. Cool. So we alluded to community as part of that, but also I know we touched on earlier that whole one Auto Trader culture. So I know, Abeer, that is something that's really important to you, and actually you it's actually a really good one. I know I think when we released the new values, this was always the statement that kept getting put out. Why does that mean a lot to you?
I mean, the whole one Auto Trader thing, I think obviously it might mean differently to different people. It is open to interpretation to a certain degree anyway. The way I sort of perceive it is that we, even though we are obviously part of different working groups, oftentimes is cross-functional teams coming together to achieve like a common goal. And when that happens, when you are sort of working towards a common goal, you're almost like you're operating in a way, and if there is trust and transparency there, you're operating in a way that you are targeting all those different permutations of that product could particularly take or service could take, so you don't necessarily leave any demographic of customer behind. You don't leave an unended journey. You don't leave any stones unturned in a way, which obviously builds that confidence, and that is only possible if you are operating as a unit, and not only necessarily within the working group, but also as a wider community when you take into account like the opinions and the views of different stakeholders, whether that's OLT, that's RDS, or there's any other support team. Those are all views that you need to consider when you are actually working or developing any product or service. And I think it's particularly important now as we sort of pick up our focus on internal systems and our CX blue card. So I think we are slowly moving away from this thinking of MVPs or minimum viable products and more towards MVEs, so almost like minimum viable experiences, because you're thinking about it like from a more end-to-end perspective. Like, okay, cool, this is an amazing product, it does the job, but actually who's going to be looking after the operational overhead? Who is going to be looking after this particular permutation? So if a customer, and there's so many personas of consumers as well, if they require any assistance or require any help, like if they do call us up, who would be in a position to answer their query in the best possible way? And I think when you are working on such complex products and systems and processes, you want the workforce to feel like no reluctance when they're sharing ideas. Like you want to be in a position where you feel completely comfortable to like bring your concerns and anything that's like gnawing at you. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to work like that. Like we need everyone to be able to voice those opinions, because only when they're on the table can you actually think, yes, that's a really good point. We need to take that into consideration. And, there'll often be cases, because obviously given the fact of how many customers we have and the different personas of consumers and how many consumers use us, there will always be instances where you can't account for everybody, but at least you know that, right? So it's something that you have planned for. It's something that you can sort of say confidently, yes, this is something that we are aware of, and we do have a process for that particular journey.
Yeah.
So I do think it's a key value in what we're trying to become as a company.
Yeah. I think that's why it matters that we've always been encouraged to just get around a table or get in a room quite often. Yeah, just get in a room, just have a meeting about it, stop chatting over Slack all the time. And I think it really helps. And I think this is why, for us as a company, the value of going into an office environment on a regular basis helps. And we're quite flexible about it as well. But I think that the only thing that I think is really crucial to what we do is having those couple of days a week where we do come in and you use it for networking and chatting to people and just getting things sorted. Do that desk walk, you just sat at your desk and you're like, right, sat over there, I'm going to chat to him. And I think it really opens us up to just like, look, we're all in the office, let's just chat about it, rather than I've got to wait amongst loads of messages on emails and Slack. So I think that really helps as well.
It's a good point. I've certainly got sort of friends and family members who work for different businesses, some in remote capacities, and it's not always the case that people are keen to come back into the office, as I'm sure you know. Doesn't really feel like that amongst the colleagues here. You know, there's a lot of colleagues that are keen to sort of collaborate, use that diversity of personality to make the right decisions. I think the more we get in person, the more that enables that process, really.
So much easier.
But we are hybrid, so there is, like you mentioned, that flexibility. But I know anecdotally hear a lot about corridor conversations here, and that is so true. Just
100%.
grabbing someone in the corridor is a lot easier than putting in a Teams meeting. But equally, because we have those fixed and flex days, it's really nice to have those days at home where you just want to get something done.
And just like the space to think as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a really nice environment, and I wouldn't say anybody hates coming into the office because it's pleasant. You know, the food's actually really good. We were just talking about soup and paninis. So.
The meal deals.
Yeah,
so
we've just got a new canteen or a new provider, and they are very good, and they do a very good soup and panini deal. Awesome. So just to kind of wrap things up, from each of you, what do you think the benefits of having values are? So just like a couple of one-liners from each of you as we kind of see the episode out.
I think for me, it's having that sort of singular way of working, that constant drive by everybody across the business to do the right thing, whether that's for consumers, for retailers. Personally, don't mind sharing that, my dad was a car dealer for about 30, 40 years, so it's a personal thing for me as to wanting to do the right thing by retailers. But, it genuinely feels that everybody in the business is aligned with that. And I think the values absolutely feed that culture, really. So for me, that's the importance of them, yeah.
I think for me, it's about that collaboration piece. And like we've mentioned so many times, nobody's out to get anybody, and everybody is just great in their own way. And I think we've again mentioned this, but to sort of summarise, sometimes the right outcome isn't the easiest outcome, but it's getting there together and feeling that we are all one team. And I think we all embody these values without even realising we're doing it on a daily basis, and that's what makes Auto Trader. And you don't meet a person here that you think, oh, not sure what I think about them. Everybody is just genuine. And wants the best. So that's why it's really important to me.
Yeah, I think I'll completely second that, and I'll add that we talk about values here quite a bit. I mean, we're doing that right now to this podcast, and I think it makes it a more sort of a conscious thing that we actively work on, and that was demonstrated by obviously the leadership team as well when we sort of brought in the new values of being decisive and being adaptable. So it is something that is almost like a moving piece. It's something that we look at, we sort of think about, and it is not something in the background, but it's actually something quite very much in the foreground. It's something that we do consciously take into consideration. So it just acts like almost like guiding pillars when you are in sort of difficult decision making process or anything on those lines. It does help guide those decisions in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. Helps us on recruitment as well, actually, because when I applied for this role, rather than, you know, the focus on skills or experience. You know,
Yeah.
everybody's got that and everyone is a worthy candidate in that sense. But when it comes down to it, it is, you know, do you work for AutoTrader? Does AutoTrader work for you as well? And it is very much a two-way kind of conversation. It's never, well, we'll decide if you're right for us. And I think actually it was a really good way of thinking, because when I was going through like the competency questions, like you do thinking, you're like, okay, a situation where I have collaborated with somebody or I've had to adapt, it does get you thinking, and you think, okay, if this is like the everyday way of working, is this right? And it does help you question or help you make that decision as well as a candidate. And hopefully it helps a lot of other people who might be thinking about applying as well.
Yeah.
It's just a really brilliant way of looking at it.
Yeah, I love the inclusivity as well.
Yeah.
It is so, we're so inclusive.
Yeah.
And everybody values each other.
Yeah.
And like we've touched on, for their different personalities and strengths and weaknesses even.
Yeah.
That you know, it's all a learning curve. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, as we said at the start, though, I think that the difference is actually sort of there's reasons behind those values, and hopefully we've explained today like some of the benefits of them, really. But I think, yeah, just working amongst people who embody those values really is really, really helpful in so many different ways.
Yeah, they do definitely filter through.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the time that we have today. Thank you for coming on to the show. Hope everyone's enjoyed listening. And yeah, that is all for this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Don't forget to like, rate, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on Spotify and Apple. And we'll see you next week for another instalment.